Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this special edition of the program Jones and Company. On this program today, we are speaking with the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Right Honourable Perry G. Christie. Mr. Christie is the most successful politician of his generation, having served in the Parliament of the Bahamas for some 40 years. He has been Minister of Health, Minister of Tourism, Minister of Agriculture, and of course Prime Minister and Minister of Finance on two separate occasions. He is now in his second term as the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. There have been many achievements under the name of Perry G. Christie, and today on our program we are going to discuss a little bit about his 40 years in government, and we are also going to talk about the year that was and this 2015. And by the way, we wish all of you a Happy New Year. Prime Minister, Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Mr. Jones, and a Happy New Year to the people of the Bahamas.
Thank you. Prime Minister, let's look at your 40 years in politics in the Bahamas. When you were a law student in London, did you ever think that you would be Prime Minister of the Bahamas?
You know, when we left the Bahamas in 1963, there was a group of us who left to go abroad, either to United Kingdom, Canada, United States, and we all aspired to come back to help bring about what we knew to be majority rule. It happened before we finished school, but we followed it. I had the opportunity with Dr. Nottage to form something called UNICOL, where we brought students together, Frankie Wilson, Emmerich Knowles, the rest of us, from the different universities we were at. We would come home in the summer, we would meet, we would talk about what we would do, we would bring in political figures and have them speak to us, but all with a view to fomenting political change. And so for me, I've had a wonderful time, but I have to answer and say I did not think at the time that I would be Prime Minister. That came later on as I won elections and won a second and a third. Then I knew that people liked me and that I could go all the way in public life.
But you also knew that you would one day be involved in politics.
There's no doubt about it. From a child, I aspired to, you know, I really looked at political figures, Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Orville Tenquist, Arthur Folks. These people led me, I think, at an early stage to like politics, to be intrigued by politics. And I remember as a youngster being taken by Ed Moxey, and Sinclair Oughton to the National Committee for Positive Action meetings, NCPA meetings. And I would sit in the back of the room at St. George's Hall or St. Agnes Hall, wherever they were meeting, and I would listen to the older men speak of politics and speak of political change. And I was the youngest member, and really wasn't a member, the youngest person there. Mm-hmm. And I thought that helped me to mature my views, my aspirations, and I knew then that politics was for me. I loved to see the lawyers in courts. My father took me once. I saw Orville Tenquist prosecuting and Paul Adley defending in the criminal courts. And the ostentatious flair that I saw there, the articulation, the eloquence inspired me to want to be a lawyer. And so the two went together. One, I studied law. Two, I became a debater at university, and three, Sir Lyndon Pilling at the right stage offered me a seat in Parliament. I accepted and I won.
You were offered a Senate appointment at the age of 30, I believe. And from time to time I hear you talk about your high school days, and sometimes I believe that you understate your capacity. You have understated your erudition and your ability to manipulate the language in academia?
Well, you know, I don't know if I understate, but the fact of the matter is I've had an extraordinary past. As a youngster, I showed that I was smart enough to pass on a competitive basis for the government high school. But also as a youngster, I had some form of attention deficit. I wasn't paying attention to the classes, so I repeated a class. And then by the rules of the school, eventually I was put out of the school on the basis that they said I should go to a trade. And Donald Davis took me in hand, told my parents that's nonsense. Later on, headmaster H.M. Davies of Government High School asked me to come back because he'd reviewed the records and he thought they'd made a mistake. But by then I had taken O-levels from night school past O-levels, and I was telling my parents, send me to England because I think I could succeed. And I went to England, got a place at university in England, and when I went to England, my contemporaries like Bernard Nottage and Dwight Glover and Eddie Bailey, they were going to England into university. I was going to do A-levels and some O-levels, and I just compressed everything into a short period of time, passed the exams, I suppose demonstrated I had some ability in doing so, and then I went to university and I won the first year debating competition at university, in a huge university in England, and that spoke volumes. It gave me the confidence to know that I was going to be able to be successful in life if I employed what the lessons I had learnt, the disappointment, getting back up, not giving in, not giving up, and just really measuring myself on my ability to move forward and forget what had happened in the past, but use it almost as a catalyst for my development. And so I use that as a story to young people, as a story to parents, that you may have a bad time initially, but you must not give up, that you're measured really on your capacity to keep on trying to be the best you can. And sometimes it takes longer than the next person. So never give up. Yes. Have confidence.
You've never lost an election, and you ran for the same seat, I believe, for your entire political career. But you, I'm sure, had some low points and some high points.
Yeah, you know, you learn very quickly in politics that people have to like you. And so naturally, I think I was a likable kind of person by my demeanor, by my nature, by my outreach, my own personality as such. And then it helped to have been an athlete, to be a junkanoo. So that meant you could cast a wide circle with your friends and your friendship. Then you had parents. My parents were sort of defining figures in the valley, in that area that I came from, and they were the initial settlers in that area, and so people respected them. And even when people were of the opposite politics, they respected my parents. They knew I was a part of that, and therefore, even though they were not going to vote for me, I always described the valley as being, people might not support you, but they'll take you and put you in your bed if you fall down before their house. In other words, you're part of the family, but when it comes to the elections, we're going to disagree. But I think it's my likability that people came to know about me. People came after people like you. They get to know you. When they get to know you, they get to see that you're smart, that you believe in some things. And so I've been able to take into my political life my personality, my background, my own experiences, which were up and down in terms of life. And therefore, my whole life, I think, reflects the sort of ups and downs of people who are living there, who are young married couples or single mothers who aspired for their children to be the best they can. They saw in me many things that they could point to their children as being something they should emulate.
You know, many students of politics will remember that you ran as an independent after you had some difficulty in the Progressive Liberal Party in 1984. Would you think that that is one of the low points in your political career, or how do you measure that?
Well, you know, the elections were 1987,
Yes.
And it was the most interesting point in my life because in those elections, the FNM had taken a position that they would not put a candidate against Hubert Ingram and Perry Christie, and they would not run a candidate against A.D. Hanna. And you know, when Hubert and I were fired, A.D. Hanna came to our side.
Yes, that was 84.
Yeah,
when you were fired.
We were fired in 84. And so we had this period going into 87, where the party decided to name candidates to run against Hubert and myself, but not to run against A.D. Hanna. And it was one of the most wonderful campaigns I could ever expect to be in, because people of the Valley came together in my area, and so you could go and look at my political headquarters and see Father Dudley Strawn sitting there playing checkers, and someone who ordinarily wouldn't get involved. But the underdog nature of my campaign brought all of them together to help in it. And so, I think what was noteworthy for me about running as an independent, I always knew I would want to be a PLP in the mainstream. And I never took steps that would be contrary to the ethic and the rules of the game, so to speak. I stayed within the confines of the rules of the game, and so it wasn't difficult for Lyndon Pindling to come back to me and offer me a place in the government, because it's something my wife and I decided that that's what we were going to do. We were going to remain PLP. Even when we were independent leading PLP. And Hubert, when he made his decision, went one way, we went the other way.
That relationship between you and Sir Lyndon Pindling, that was almost a father-son relationship, it seemed. He handpicked you, I believe, in his waning days in politics, when he really wanted to give up the leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party, didn't he?
I think to a great extent, Sir Lyndon saw in me someone who he would wish to replace him. That would explain why he worked so hard to see to it that I would win in the competition within the party, that I would. I think he saw in me someone who would bring the qualities he would like to see to the leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party. And I really will always treasure the moments when he was on one of the campaigns for the leadership, when he stood outside the door with his cane. And he was clearly sick. He was now, we know, clearly dying. But he was making a statement in support of my leadership that he wanted me to be the leader, and he wanted every single PLP who was voting to see that he supported me in that leadership. I've never forgotten that, and I'm in so many different ways. I've tried to live up to what he saw in me in terms of my leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party.
How are you, as a leader and Prime Minister, different from Sir Lyndon Pindling? Many people say that there aren't any politicians who can step in his shoe. He was the father of the nation. He had many firsts. But when you look at his legacy and what you have done and what you are doing, how are you different?
I think we're different. I think Sir Lyndon Pindling, as the first, will always be in a category by himself, because it had to take a very special person in the midst of a lot of ambitious, aspiring young political leaders. And if you think of all of the potential leaders in that party that he was leading, that Sir Lyndon Pindling had to be special to emerge. A special kind of charisma, a special kind of relationship with people. And so when people were able to look at the figurehead of a movement, they have to be inspired by that figurehead to follow him, even though the consequences could be dire for them. And so Pindling had those special qualities that have to be gifted, you know. It's a God-given kind of thing. So I'm different. I have the charisma. I have the ability for people to have confidence in me. I work as hard as he does. We receive the same kind of severe criticism that we have to go through as leaders of our particular brand of politics and our party. But I would like to think that I have benefited immensely from the fact that I'm one of the few politicians who old enough to have been with the generation of the founding fathers and to have sat at their feet, to have watched how they deliberate, to have watched how they make decisions. But I think the most important thing is to see their love for country. That no matter what weaknesses they may have had, no matter what kind of politics they may have had, no one would ever deny that they had this incredible love for their country and was motivated by that. I have the same kind of feeling.
You know, I've been around politics long enough to know that there was a time, Prime Minister, when there were some people in the Free National Movement who wanted you to be leader of the FNM as well. Why did you not join the FNM?
Well, you know, I suppose I'm going to have to wait until I write my book, God willing, to tell the real story to that. But I sat and watched Honourable Tenquest and Kendall Isis come into our law firm to speak with Ingram and to know that something was in progress there. But at the same time, there were others who were meeting with me, and others by name in large numbers who were meeting with me and who were claiming to have a clear majority of who would have wished me to become the leader. My wife and I met with Ingram at our home, and we had a real live discussion on the issue of whether we would join the FNM, and we decided that we would not join the FNM, that we were going to remain PLPs, and we would remain in the position that we were in until such time as circumstances changed. We were both independent members, and he was making his move, so we said we were not going to go with him. I actually told Frank Watson once that, listen, I'm not coming on that side, so go and take care, Ingram, and do your best, and so forth and so on. Of course, I thought at the time that he was going into the wilderness, and little did I realize that Ingram was on his way to becoming Prime Minister in 1992.
Finally, in this segment, as we reminisce of your 40 years as a parliamentarian, what has politics done to your family life?
You know, the wonderful thing about today is that I'm getting to know my oldest son. I did not know him. I did not have time for him. I did not have time for family in those initial years of politics. I was just giving so much to public life. And so the first thing I want to be able to say is that I thank God that I've had the opportunity now where every morning he walks into my room and he tells me what's in the newspaper. We share an email address, what's on the email, and he brings me up to date with everything else. And so we've gotten to know each other and to love each other in a special way, to respect each other, and for me to be satisfied that in the event that something happens to me, I have someone who can succeed me very easily in managing the family. And you know, we have an Adam in our family, and therefore there has to be that clear understanding and commitment that there's a special person in the family who will always be a dependent. So my living long enough has enabled me to make up for what the inadequacies that presented themselves during my early stages in politics. My wife has had to put up with one hell of a lot, and she has to be a special person, and she is a special person. She's an incredibly brilliant woman and beautiful woman, of course, and she has been able to have wonderful jobs that was making more money than me, and was able to make a major enduring contribution to family. But I think, Randall, when I look back, is the unfairness that happens to politicians, the criticism that goes to the root of a family. I mean, my wife is not in politics, and there were on occasions when they would come and describe her in terms of her own life as lacking the integrity in marriage. And it's so unfair to a woman who is so infinitely faithful and strong in her commitment to family life and her husband. Your daughter, the same thing, you know, and you try to see it where they say things about them that is totally untrue. I mean, you know, they said that my daughter was in some kind of program for recovering addict or something of that kind. I mean, and these are things that happens when you watch the family. And I remember my mother one day after the 92 elections crying and telling me people came before her house and was shouting obscenities at her. And, you know, you come to accept these things. So in public life, you know, you're hoping that one day we will mature as a country, and the criticism will be in context of what you're doing or what you're not doing, and it wouldn't be so personally driven and so angry and venomous in its intent. But listen, when you've been around as long as I have, you develop a very hard skin. And in this particular case now, in this movement of winning in 2012, I am absolutely determined to be a transformative Prime Minister, and there is no doubt in my mind. I know what I want to do. I've led my government in what I want to do. I'm getting them to agree with me, and when they have wonderful ideas that challenge my ideas, we compromise in the right way. And so the Bahamas can expect that the sum total of the experiences of Perry Gladstone Christie over these 40 years in public life will be reflected in every degree in the coming years in this country as a result of the work that will be done by this government, my government, in this term.
Prime Minister, let's take a break here. When we return, we are going to talk about some of the things that you are doing now, and we want to talk about some of the challenges that we have in the country. Some of the questions are going to be difficult, I promise you.
Okay.
Let's take this break here. We'll come right back. Jones and Company, and today we are pleased to have the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as our guest on the program. Prime Minister, 2014 for some people was a difficult year, and you preside over a country that sometimes we seem to be making tremendous progress, and sometimes there are some people who are living in despair. But you describe 2014.
You've really hit the nail on this one. 2014 was the beginning of our coming out of the recession in a meaningful way, where for the first time we could see almost light at the end of the tunnel. We knew, for example, that when we won in 2012, that we had to deal with trying to increase the revenue of the country, because what had happened was that the requirement for infrastructural development was outpacing in terms of costs the capacity of the government to meet those expenditure requirements in sufficient time. For example, if you're developing any island in the Bahamas, and our commitment was to do something unusual. In my first term, I made a commitment for anchor resorts. I knew that the major problem facing our country was the imbalance in our development. And from a macroeconomic point of view, too many people were coming to New Providence, too many people going to Grand Bahama, to Freeport, looking for employment, what the sociologists call this pull to the urban areas. And so I made a commitment that people questioned at times, that I had to create economic activity in all of the major islands. I had to have my government pointed in that direction, because therein lies the future of our country and orderly development of our country. Now, once you make a decision of that kind, then you know that it's going to take time. And so it's going to take time, because you have to ensure that the area is seen by people of the world for foreign direct investment. They can know about Maguana, they can know about Acklands, they can know about Bimini, and because you want them to see certain things in those islands that would enable them to say, we could have a thriving business industry in those islands. So we made that commitment, but we knew it would take time. So 2014 was a year of our making a major commitment, what I call a foundational commitment, a platform that we were building that will launch itself in 2015, 2016, and the years behind. We had to commit ourselves, Wendell, to proper and strong governance. We saw all around us in the Caribbean where countries like Barbados, which was always well-run country, suddenly under IMF monitoring, Jamaica under IMF monitoring. We knew, therefore, that we could not go that way. And so we, therefore, had to commit ourselves, one, to raising revenue, and two, to controlling expenditure. Mm-hmm. And in the control of expenditure, we had to commit ourselves to taxation reform. And so this whole idea of what we had to do, and whether the F&M agrees or disagrees, it doesn't matter. Anyone who was the government of the Bahamas after 2012 was bound to have to do certain things, one of which was expenditure, and the next one, raising revenue. In expenditure, you had to be creative. How do you go about trying to meet infrastructural demands? So we brought about innovations like public-private partnerships, and we began to talk about that. And all of a sudden, in Bimini, it manifested itself. So in Bimini, where we had to lengthen the runway, where we had to build a new pier, where we had to fix the roads, we had a private developer come along agree to do all of those things at the expense of the Bahamas government, and that the Bahamas government will offset that expenditure through relaxing the casino provisions in terms of taxation. We pay back through offsetting and taxation. So again, Bimini was therefore developing. That same innovation will be employed in other places where we need $30 million for infrastructure in Andros alone. We need $15 million in Acklands. We need in other places in the Bahamas. Just to give you an example, what 2014 presented to us, we knew, for example, that our airports were requiring tremendous intervention, and so 28 airports in in the Bahamas, and about $148 million was required to fix them and bring them up to date and to have the security and have the human resources deployed in there. And you can't do that all one time.
Yeah. But Prime Minister, do you think people are understanding what your government is all about? Are you connecting with the Bahamian people in this regard?
This is what 2014 presented to us. We knew we also had a failed referendum, for example. Right? We knew that, but nevertheless, events took an about turn in that area where the governor of the central bank brought to our attention this calamitous circumstance that was developing, where a new banking order was developing in the country, which would have caused us even more headaches. So we made a commitment that we had to regularize the gaming industry, full stop. And even though for 100 years the numbers business and web shops were out there, we had to regulate it, and we've done so. We've put the most comprehensive legislation in place. Now we took a big hit for that. So some people would not understand, but we had to take a big hit because we committed ourselves to running the country in the right way.
But there are people who say you're flown in the face of democracy and that you didn't respect the wishes of the people.
But in the final analysis, I made the point that where the best interest of the Bahamas conflicts with a commitment and a promise I made, the best interest of the Bahamas will reign supreme. In other words, we will be directed by the best interest of the country. I cannot do more than say the governor of the central bank told me that we now have a banking order. We now know, Mr. Jones, that is running, we were predicating it on 400 million. It's around $600 million in this thing circulating. And so we had to do something about it. I'm glad we did something about it, and I'm sure in the fullness of time people will respect us for the way in which we went about doing it. We had to decide on that, right? This is what was presented to us. This became a very difficult subject because people were concerned you were going to lose an election.
But there are people who believe, Prime Minister, that your government has not gone far enough. Your government has not enabled Bahamians to be on the same level with foreigners who come into the Bahamas.
Let's take that.
Yeah.
See, we came into power with unemployment among young people of around 30%, unemployment around 18% with Bahamians on average. The first thing you had to do was arrest the slide we're in. You might be talking about empowerment for Bahamians, but you know empowerment has to come with resuscitating the economy, getting it better. And so we set about to get the economy better. In my last budget communication, I gave a clear indication that investment opportunities are now presenting themselves throughout the Bahamas, in New Providence, etc., and that we are going to now be able to create the jobs. Unemployment numbers will go down. More and more Bahamians will be employed, more and more Bahamians will have opportunities to go into business, and it's in that context that Bahamians will be empowered and have an opportunity to do well. For example, let's take Bimini. In Bimini, we now have as many people who want to work can work. People have come from Grand Bahama and New Providence for jobs in Bimini. But the opportunity for entrepreneurs, for business, small businesses now are there for the Biminite.
Yeah, but Bimini is a small island, one of the smallest islands in the Bahamas. You're dealing with New Providence and Grand Bahama, where the vast majority of our population lives.
Okay, the point I was making when you interrupted me was that we had to fix the economy. And one of the ways to fix the economy was to increase revenue. And so we decided, for example, that we had to work with the business community. And so we gave the business community an opportunity to join us in making a determination of the model that we would use. We gave them all of the freedom that they wanted to arrive at their decision. Ultimately, we came up with the answer that it would be VAT, and we said it would be VAT at 7.5%. I then met with them and said, now, listen, I do not believe philosophically in imposing things on an economy as small as the Bahamas. Therefore, I want to work collaboratively with the business community. And the business community got together with us through the Chamber of Commerce, and they agreed to help us introduce VAT to the country. That's what's happening now. Now, all of that with a view to increasing the revenue stream. We've also said we're forming with uncollectible parts of real property tax. We've hired an accounting firm to help us collect the revenue. We're modernizing customs. So you can see that in terms of all of the things we're doing, we're automating collections in the Road Traffic Authority and Customs Department. So you can see we're making a major effort to get a sound economy going, create more jobs, lay the basis for Bahamians being able to have more business opportunities. But the point I'm making, though, what I've asked you, the point I'm making is this. Bahamians, you asked the question of whether they appreciate. I don't think no, and I don't think we have done as an effective a job as we should, because I'm talking to you about Bimini, and you said Bimini is a small island, but Bimini has already given 800 new jobs, with another 200 rooms and the hotel becoming available by mid-January. That's another 200 jobs. Yes. So you find, therefore, that Bimini is now setting itself as a model for islands like San Salvador, where construction will start on improving the plant in San Salvador. In Cat Island, where construction will start in Cat Island. In Exuma, where construction will be going on in the year 2015. So what you're finding is that this anchor approach we've taken to creating economic activity in the different islands, this is what is healthy about it, will create jobs in those islands, Mr. Jones. And for the first time, people will see the sense of it, where in Bimini, in Grand Bahama, in Abaco, where things are happening, in Grand Bahama, where memories have started, and we're going further in that regard. People will see opportunities for jobs and opportunities for going into business. That's what's happening.
I fully understand your point, Prime Minister, and your government should be congratulated for what you are doing in terms of putting jobs in those islands. However, we have about 40,000 people thereabouts unemployed in the Bahamas. There are tens of thousands who do not want to leave New Providence. Okay. And there are many who do not want to leave Grand Bahama.
Well, let's talk New Providence, let's talk Grand
So
Bahama.
let's talk New Providence. Okay. And the extent to which, first of all, the businessman feels empowered in New Providence, in the Bahamas generally speaking. There are scores of businessmen who talk about the inability of your government to empower them. And this is your opportunity to speak to that.
Well, firstly, again, in New Providence, we have Bahama. Bahama will employ around 7,000 people. 2,200 new rooms coming on stream, and they should open by May. People are being employed now. When you have, therefore, such a giant leap in employment, okay, you find then that businesses thrive because those businesses find a way to cater to the people who now have new jobs. Secondly, the Hilton Hotel is being bought by the Chinese company. Construction will start in April in that area, major construction activity. We've agreed with Lyford Key. Lyford Key will expand into office buildings and cottages and condominiums again in 2015, so you can expect construction activity there. New Providence. Albany continues to employ hundreds of Bahamians. They are expanding and going ahead, and we've announced the product going on there so you can see it. We've given permission for 2 or 3 condominium blocks to take place in the western district of the island. Again, construction activity, economic activity. So this whole aspect of the potential in the jobs will now come into being in 2015, and therefore the economy is going to be healthier. The business persons, right, who are feeling embattled now will begin to relax, because they're going to feel the cash flow moving around. Whatever businesses they're in, we're going to have a significant jump forward and impact on the economy through these new jobs, through people purchasing and being free to do the things they want to do and using their discretionary income. So I expect 2015, we are projecting a growth of over 2% in 2015. I expect, therefore, with the American economy now moving in the strong direction upwards, that the impact's going to be very positive on the country here in New Providence and in Grand Bahama. Just like in Grand Bahama. In Grand Bahama, the memories grew the economy by about 37%. Moving this new tourism product into the Canadian company Sunwing, taking over the old Reef Hotel, employing people. They have such a robust program planned for 2015 that it looks good. Then the Celebration cruise ship, a new cruise ship was bought, and so you have 2 cruise ships, the Balearia and the Celebration, bringing people into Grand Bahama. We have a proposal for Grand Bahama, 2 proposals for Grand Bahama that I'm not going to speak to right now, but they're very active, they're very meaningful, will employ hundreds of Grand Bahamians, and so I expect in the year 2015 for there to be a jump forward. I also received a communication from Hutchison Whampoa, who pointing out to me the need for the government to get involved in making sure the Lucayan Beach Hotel is able to pay its way. And we are actively engaged in negotiations with respect to the Lucayan Beach. So, Mr. Jones, one final point. The government showed its flexibility in Grand Bahama, for example, when it imposed certain taxes in the last budget year. They protested and they came back to me. In consideration, I said, of my rolling back the taxes, would you expand your involvement in the economy of Grand Bahama? So the container port and MSC Shipping agreed to do that, and that's in train now. The shipyards, so the pharmaceutical companies. So in effect, in being able to be pragmatic and wise in the application of taxation policy, we've been able to trigger off an expansion of the economy in Grand Bahama that will be felt by Grand Bahama. So to those persons who are in New Providence and Grand Bahama, I'm saying to them that the first thing you should recognize is that a healthy Bahamas will mean a more meaningful time for you. And what do I mean by healthy Bahamas? We're in Bimini, we're in Abaco, where we have Baker's Bay going along, Winding Bay, Schooner Bay, these major developments where Newport will be put. Abaco is well on its way, right? In Grand Bahama, which I've just described, especially with the new port in the making, right? Grand Bahama is well on its way. In Eleuthera, we're negotiating a Four Seasons in Eleuthera, some other developments in Eleuthera, well on its way. Listen to me, in Exuma, right, we're negotiating and finished negotiations for a new hotel golf course in the Keys, Williams Key and Children's Bay Key, and new homes in Baratari, new developments in Exuma, a new purchaser for Crab Key, new people coming in. Just this week, yesterday I told you I was in some sensitive negotiations, and those negotiations will result in a minimum of another 200 rooms going into Exuma. And the people who are going to put them there, I shan't call their names now, are saying that they could move as fast as my government would take to make the decisions to clear the way for them to move. So what do you see happening here, my friend, is that the person in New Providence, the business in New Providence, the businessman in Grand Bahama will suddenly see a Bahamas that is burgeoning, that is moving in the right direction, where people are being employed, and where they will be able to have the opportunity to sell their product.
I understand your enthusiasm, Prime Minister.
It's more than enthusiasm. See, it's more than enthusiasm.
Yes.
It's now based on approvals given. And this is particularly important to the Bahamas with Cuba opening up. Right? And that, you see, when people put their money in the ground, they can't move it. And one of the things that you can see, if that you could be wise enough, and let me just tell you what wise enough. We decided that we've gone as a country long enough without a plan. So we articulated a position and went to the College of the Bahamas, which by 2016 will be the University of Bahamas, to make this point because it's meaningful, that we expect a national plan guiding us for the next 25 years to be put in place by mid-next year.
All of that is good. There are a whole lot of people who complain about the amount of time that it takes for things to happen. And you enumerated a number of projects.
Right.
And there are many Bahamians who feel encouraged. But your government is often criticized for the length of time that it takes to make things happen.
Well,
a quick response.
A quick response is this, that people have to understand my government is also to protect the future of the Bahamas. 90% of these developments, for example, involve environmental safeguards, environmental impact assessments, environmental management plans. They take time. Whenever you are developing an islands like Meguana or Eleuthera or Bimini, environmental matters are very, very important because you owe to future generations of Bahamians the opportunity to see the Bahamas we love and we share. So therefore, that's it. Yes, can we speed up business? We must. For us to be competitive in financial services, for us to be competitive in the investment areas, for us to be able to get Bahamians off the mark and more involved in business opportunities. We have to be quicker, we have to be more efficient, and it's always work in progress. And that is why we have to introduce more technology, automation in things we're doing. We're too slow, and that is a major concern for us. But part and parcel of the improvements and the innovations we're introducing are all calculated to bring about the results that people are complaining of and that they want. They want a much more efficient form of governance, much more efficient services. Those are what we are promising to give them. That's what we promised to give them. And to people who don't believe it, you know, when I started off and said the government of the Bahamas under the Perry Gladstone Christie will move to take 2% of BTC back. People say, stop from talking nonsense. That can't happen. You know it can't happen. You're being foolish. Well, the result is this. Clearly, we had to compromise in the sense that we do not have 51% of the voting rights, but we have 51% of the economic rights. And that is a far different position to what the Ingram government left the Bahamas in. They said it couldn't be done. Christie can't do it. Christie did it.
Yes.
And the PLP did it.
Prime Minister, since you made the point of BTC, let us talk about energy. The situation at BEC.
Right.
There are a good number of businessmen, ordinary Bahamians, who are unhappy with BEC and unhappy with what the government has done and is doing with BEC. Energy is extremely important for the running of business, for the running of homes. When are we going to see BEC properly functioning and the cost of electricity coming down?
Shortly. Let me say that yesterday I had a meeting with the company that has been recommended to be the manager, the new manager of BEC, because the government started off in a request for proposal on BEC being privatized, ultimately determined that it should adopt a model similar to what is at the airport, with Vantage managing the airport. And so we chose to go and look for a manager who could give us the innovations, the capital injection, and therefore cheaper electricity. We always knew that the greatest challenge to this country is the cost of energy, both to domestic, to people, Bahamian people, and to investors. Yesterday I had a meeting, and the only reason I had the meeting was to satisfy myself on the basis of what was presented to Cabinet by the task force, right? And I should satisfy myself, I had a number of Cabinet ministers with me, that the people who I were talking to had the capacity to deliver the product. And I knew whilst this was happening that Emera, a Canadian company in Freeport, was introducing lower costs.
What are you
right
suggesting,
now,
that
it's about
Bahamians are unable to run BEC? We had this situation with BTC, and Leon Williams came back and he's running BTC. Are you suggesting that the management of BEC should not be Bahamian?
No, the management might remain Bahamian. That's not the point. The point I'm making is we want somebody who's able to come in and spend hundreds of millions of dollars, if necessary, in putting the kind of plant in place. Let me just say this, that when we came to power, BEC's legacy debt was about $460 million. That's what a cumulative figure. We have to find a way to pay that under government guarantee. One of the reasons why we wanted the private sector people involved was to see if we could get them to absorb this debt as a part of the whole new development of the new BEC. What we have decided to do up to this point is to negotiate what we call a rate reduction bond, where we're going to take that off the debt, that $460 million, and put that into the bill in such a creative way where it's a couple cents each electricity bill you have, it will be paid for. But that when we introduce, we hope, right, the new management team, we're doing it bearing in mind that we want to empower Bahamians. We're not stopping that from happening. But we also want to bring in a management team similar to what happened that would give us the best in efficiencies and in access to capital and knowledge in being able to move forward. That's what we're doing now. What we have determined for ourselves is this is the best formula for BEC, the best formula for the Bahamas. And so that you know it, it has to happen with the Water Corporation, and it has to happen with Bahamas Air. It has to happen with ZNS. The country should not be subjected to having to subsidize these areas where the private sector could get involved in it. Ultimately, this whole outcome may be private people running and owning these matters. But for the time being, the government of the Bahamas has made a decision specifically with respect to BEC. One, that we will have a new manager, and we will have a new manager before the end of January. Two, right, that new manager would come in and have an immediate reduction of the cost of electricity. All right, that's what we're discussing now. And three, would be able to bring into the islands of the Bahamas alternative energy methodology, and that is the solar, the wind, whatever is cost efficient. We believe that the people we're talking about can do that. So in the final analysis, governments have to make decisions about advancing the interests of the people of their country. My government has decided to do it in that fashion. But at the same time, as I spoke to them yesterday, I made it very clear that we want a dignified transition, one in which the interests of Bahamian executives are protected. And so the fact of the matter of who's running it we are not moving away from the realization. After all, it is us who superintended the new managing director of BTC coming in. So we do understand that, Mr. Williams. We do understand that. And in my meeting with the general manager of BEC, who were in these meetings with me talking to them, and I assume that he will, in transition, move to new management. So, Mr. Jones, the point is this. You began by asking a question in almost a negative way, as if you did not expect a positive answer from me. But you're going to get a positive answer. Before the end of February, you will be hearing from us, and we will be trumpeting, right, what we are doing with this, and we are going to be saying it's manifestly in the best interest of this country. And I was talking with a hotelier who talks about spending $180,000 a month in terms of electricity bills. This is going to be a significant breakthrough for them. The Minister of Tourism was telling us today of someone writing him from Freeport saying, my electricity bill for the first time has come down to manageable proportions. And so we are talking in terms of the cost per kilowatt hour of a significant reduction again in a short period of time. In fact, I told the cabinet today in a meeting that I'm going on the 4th to China. When I return, I will present to them my recommendations with respect to moving forward with BEC.
Okay. Prime Minister, I want to talk a little bit about that because I am told that that will also be added to electricity, to the cost of electricity. Are you at all concerned that we perhaps will be going back into somewhat of a recession with the introduction of VAT? There are many Bahamians who are very anxious about it, and there are businessmen who believe that it will cause some consternation in the economy. What do you say?
Firstly, that one has to accept that there will always be the naysayers in our country. Whenever something new, firstly, VAT is here because we have to have it here. We thought it was the fairest form of taxation that we could put forward at this time. Secondly, we decided to take into consideration the concern, and therefore we reduced it to 7.5%, as opposed to what has been recommended and talked about. Right? Thirdly, we decided on the New Zealand model. We looked very carefully at that, and we decided that in exemptions, right, we were not going to be able to satisfy the people who are those, the disadvantaged, the poor in our country, because even if you rebate food, or electricity, you're exempting a lot of people. So what we decided is this, that as we introduce VAT, we're introducing a more dynamic social services policy commitment. We have what we call a cash transfer program, which will result in people having a debit card, being able to collect, and we'll be close monitoring on that, but we're going to be able to move to ensure that the most disadvantaged in our country are not impacted. We also know, while we're doing this, Mr. Jones, that we are going to reduce duty in about 100 items to do with food, to do with clothing. So,
but do you think that will be passed on?
Yeah, well, again,
to the consumer?
It's a good question. And one of the things that I have said to my cabinet is that, and to the Minister, Shane Gibson, who's responsible for consumer protection, is that I want him to police this. And I want him to police it in a way where we will publish the savings that are to people, and that should be reflected in the prices. Now, the difficulty is this. We want an all-inclusive kind of arrangement for that, in the sense that when you buy, except for the first 2 months of VAT when we have a transition, but when you buy the good, VAT will be included in the price on the shelf, and not, have some transaction at the counter. So ultimately, we have to police that in the interest of Bahamians. But in the process, we've decided now to introduce a number of these items, and whether building supplies, food items, taking off a major percentage, clothing items taking off a major percentage of them, all with the view to ensuring that there is something to pass on to consumers. Almost certainly, it's a set-off, meaning that with the VAT, they'll be able to get it for the same price. So the fact of the matter is this, that we have to police that on their behalf. The initial stages will help us between now and the budget of May of next year. We're going to watch very carefully what we've reduced to determine whether there should be more reductions, because ultimately we hope to have a very balanced economy moving forward. And so I can tell you that I brought teams from New Zealand to audit what we're doing. I've had them go through again, look at the process. They're satisfied. They'll come back in the middle of next month to look to see how it's going, because I want to ensure that we protect as best we can the Bahamian public. And when you look at what we're doing, I started off by saying we are intending to be transformative in our governance. Mr. Jones, we're taking some big issues and we're taking them head on.
Prime Minister, let me say that we're going slightly over time on this program today, because we don't get you on the program too often. And
I'm glad you did it. Even if you ask me some extra questions and use it as a different program, I'll help you find the sponsor for the program. Because it's important for me to be heard by the Bahamian people. And this is the first time in a very long time that I've ever sat down and spoken to anyone. I'm going through I'm looking at the economy of the Bahamas, and I'm looking at BAMSI, I'm looking at Andros.
Yes, yes.
These are matters, national health insurance.
Absolutely. So let's take this break here on our program, and we'll come right back.
Right.
On Jones and Company, and this is an extended edition of the program because we have quite a number of questions to put to the Prime Minister on the economy and other social development issues. And Prime Minister, we were talking about that a while ago, and so I want to move on to talk about things that have affected Bahamians in the last year very significantly. There are a whole lot of Bahamians who have lost their homes or banks have foreclosed on them. And your government had proposed a mortgage relief plan. It didn't work out, did it?
No, and we thought we had agreement with the banks, but in retrospect, when we look back, we do understand the position the banks have taken. This is a grave challenge in our country that we have had now meetings with the Royal Bank of Canada, particularly, where I had the head man from Toronto in, and I spoke with him and bared my soul to him about people who have come to me and saying not only they're going to lose their homes, but the children or the mother who was guaranteeing as a guarantor would lose theirs as a result. Then I've had the banks come to me and tell me that they have not put people out of their homes to a great extent, because if they put them out, the homes will be vandalized, and that there are large numbers of people living in homes not paying mortgages, and the bank is just watching this happen, and they're saying they need to be able to work out with the government
what is the
formula. The answer is that in a way similar to what we did with the company Resolve when we took $100 million in debt of the Bank of the Bahamas and professionalized the approach of dealing with the $100 million, where we got Deloitte and Touche and we put a professional board of directors to manage that $100 million, and we feel good about that process. Well, similarly, the banks going to have to take a hit. The banks going to recognize that they need the government's intervention, and we're working out now how that intervention will take place, what will be the carrying cost of the bank, what will be the carrying cost to the government. We believe that in terms of our own discussions with the Royal Bank of Canada, that we are close to a formula that would be agreeable. This is as much a part of the bank's offering as the government wanting to do it, and we believe it will be manifestly in the interest of people who are challenged in terms of that. People who, for example, had lost their jobs during the recession and now have jobs, now could pay, but they have this accumulated amount of money that they simply can't pay. And so these are the areas that we are addressing, and as we move into the new year, I'm hoping that we will be able to come up with a formula, because we have not given up on it. I recently met with Fidelity Bank to discuss it. They gave me some extraordinary sort of statistics to show again the gravity of the problem and how they're trying to deal with an issue where they have to make a decision that even though they can't get paid, to protect the asset, they're going to let people stay in even though they're not paying.
So the after effects of the economy, of the recession, still being felt in the Bahamas?
Oh, there's no question about it, in a very, very, very major way.
Yes.
But therefore, that is why there needs to be a very creative or innovative approach by both the banks and the government to solve this problem. Our problem when we first came to power was we were giving the banks our formula. Now what has happened is we've sat with the Royal Bank in particular, with now Fidelity Bank, and we have been working through the issues with a view to coming up with a solution that will be agreed even if we start just with the Royal Bank of Canada.
So banks are challenged. Banks are apparently losing money. Banks are downsizing. So the banks seem to be challenged even more than consumers.
Well, they are challenged. They are challenged, and it's not just the Bank of the Bahamas, as we've seen,
yes,
that has gone through this challenge. But the fact of the matter is that that we are near, okay, a formula that I think will be an agreed formula that the government could use going forward.
For all the clearing banks?
And for the economy, to make the economy better and stronger, to put the banks in a position not having lost money, because they're going to have to take a hit on this, just like the government will have, but one that will be, I think, serve the best interest of people who need to stay in their home. And, you know, it may well end up in some instances being a rent to own again, where rather than lose your home, you pay rent until such time as you are able to have that crystallized in the form of another mortgage. But the point is, we are near in a resolution to this matter. I expect to be able to address this early in the new year moving forward, and I feel very good about what we're doing now.
Where are we with BAMSI? BAMSI is a very interesting project. I visited it, and I see, however, that the roads are still not passable in some cases.
You haven't been there recently.
Okay, fine. So the roads are being repaired?
When you land now, the contract has been issued, a $7.5 million contract has been issued. The road, you can drive now along the roads. It's very smooth.
Very good.
So there's no question about that. The roads were in terrible shape. You know, BAMSI is a very interesting experiment, one that, and I call it an experiment when I started, but it's an interesting economic intervention for this reason, that Andros is about 2,300 square miles. About 43% of the land mass of the Bahamas is Andros. Mm-hmm. It has the third largest barrier reef. It has ecosystems marbled by the world. 80% of the revenue on 10,000 people live on the island is about as large or larger than Trinidad. So here's this island, right, that's just being there. I went down there and I said, I'm going to spend $100 million in this term on infrastructural improvements in this island, because it doesn't make sense to have it sitting there so rich and diverse in its offering to the world. I mean, people come in and write textbooks. The University of Miami write textbooks on flat fishing. It's the best flat fishing or fly fishing in the entire world in Andros. Someone have said it's $100 million, $200, $300 million industry not properly exploited. Whatever it is, we decided that we would go and put BAMSI there. We decided that BAMSI would have a commercial arm both on the marine side and fishery and on the agricultural side. We decided in Andros, where 30% is from fly fishing, 70% is from agriculture, sponging, crabbing, okay? 1% from agriculture, the economy down there. And so we decided we're going to change that. 138,000 arable acres of land in North Andros. Pinning once made a speech that as the lands become urban in Florida, Andros will loom in importance in terms of the pine forest producing turpentine and producing wonderful crops for export. Well, we've decided to take Pinling's vision and actualize it. And that's what's happening down there. We've decided that we're going to work with Andros farmers and farmers around the Bahamas. We'll license them. We'll bring all the technology, bring all the best farming in, and we're going to grow things, Mr. Jones, we're going to grow all the things that this country is consuming. And Andros, over the next 2-3 years, will loom in its importance in putting food on the shelves of Bahamians. Whether it's papaya, whether it's limes, whether it's fruit, vegetables, we are going to do it.
Again, is the cost being passed on? Well, I'm told that there are some things being produced in Andros, but you do not see the benefit to the consumer.
No, see, I think it's the initial stages.
Yes.
And BAMSI, being what it is also a research institute. And all of the things you're talking about, all of the concerns will be addressed. How to produce goods that are healthy, organic, how to produce goods that are needed. I mean, the Lucayan Indians used to grow cassava, and we still import cassava, for God's sake, because we never had a waxing machine or polishing machine. We still import bananas. We still import. So the point is, we have a plan. Okay. And the plan is intended to be able to impact this whole idea of diversification and cut into $1 billion worth of foodstuffs that we import every year. So BAMSI is well on its way. We expect BAMSI to impact Eleuthera, Exoma, Abaco, Freeport, Grand Bahama.
Okay. Social development, Prime Minister, there are a good number of Bahamians who are very anxious again, fearful about the level of crime in our country. Your government is clearly not doing well in terms of dealing with the challenge of crime fighting, is it?
Well, you know, the answer is that we're not dealing well, so to speak, with the murders that are taking place, the killings. You know, the statistics would show improvements in other areas, but what has happened is Bahamians justifiably, on the amount of killings, have this fear. And it's a fear that is real and tangible, and one that should motivate us not to compromise on our efforts to introduce innovations and strategies to deal with this. I can tell you that we are working assiduously to bring about the control of what is happening here, and we're taking a major approach to it. For example, lots of the killings have taken place by people who've been out on bail. And the tragedy is they become victims either through killing or being killed.
So the criminal justice system is
the criminal
broken?
Justice system has been, if not broken, has been challenged severely. But the point is this: the Attorney General, the Minister of National Security, have put in place plans that has resulted in our passing legislation to deal with gangs severely. You know, we've worked on the basis that justice must be swift, justice must be certain, justice must be severe. In terms of that, punishment must be severe. And so we've worked on that basis. But we've introducing 10 courts that will try people concurrently. In this new year, we're assigning new judges, employing new judges, etc. We've employed over 200 new police officers. We have more in training now.
But that tells you you're failing, Prime Minister.
No, it doesn't. No.
If you have to construct new courts, 10, if you have to appoint new judges, if you need new policemen, it shows you that there's an escalation of crime, and the country is really not dealing.
It shows us that there has been an escalation of crime, and that the only way you're able to deal with it, if you do the math, is to be able to recognize that the judges of the courts have said that if you cannot be tried within a period of 3 years, then you are in constitutional contravention, in other words, in contravention of the Constitution, and the person should be admitted to bail. And therefore, the only way you're able to do that is to be able to, one, give the courts greater access to jurors. So we've amended the law to allow them to be able to bring jurors even from the islands. Two, right, that they have enough courts going at the same time. So we therefore made new courts. This is now about to open, new judges to be employed, so that therefore concurrently we'll be trying these things. All of this is a sign of the times that exist.
Yeah, but during all of this, you are still manufacturing criminals. They are coming off an assembly line, as someone described it. And Prime Minister, I just wonder, you mentioned that you are spending $100 million in Andros. Why don't you spend some money in a youth development program? Don't you think the country needs to have a heavy investment in youth development programs?
Yes.
You're putting money in courts. Why not in a youth development program?
Let's put it this way. We have a commitment for a restorative program for young people. The Andros, though, don't mix it up for me. Andros is going to lay the basis for earning the revenue to pay for a youth program. A youth program is very, very costly, and yes, it is necessary. We've determined that. And yes, I have asked the Minister of Finance to find me the revenue to begin that program. So this is nothing that we're postponing. That is something that we're currently looking at. But with respect to causing there to be development. We need to have an economy that enables us to do the things you're talking about.
Fine, but
all right?
let's zero in on the
but
problems
Mr.
of
Jones,
the youth.
for the first thing you have to do is that as you look to the holistic long-term approach, being able to grab young people, give them wholesome activities, give them, propagandize them in terms of what's right, what's wrong, how to be good citizens of the country. As you're doing that, you have to deal with those that exist. And those that exist are those who are before the criminal courts, and you have to be able to try them. You just cannot have them walking around untried. So therefore, we have to create the courts. This is the only way we can do it. We have to create the new judges. We have to put them in place, and we have to have that. Whilst we're doing that, we're dealing with what you're recommending, what you're suggesting, this restorative program of young people, because we know, for example, that it is necessary, but it is a very costly affair, and yes, we know the answer. Do you lose more by not doing it as opposed to by spending now, even if you have to borrow to do it?
Doesn't the government recognize that we have an ill-disciplined society, especially with young people, Prime Minister, and there are some challenges that we have because of the miseducation of people, or undereducated people, or poorly educated young people, any one of those you want to use as a description. And all of this is manifested in a lack of discipline in the society and the social decay that we have.
You've described it accurately. The question is, what is the formula that we must use to fix it? We know we have a captive population in the school. So we know, therefore, that the school must have programs that address that. Within the schools itself, for example, there are varying degrees of attention deficit disorders going on in the schools that the schools must diagnose, because these are people who are vulnerable to be exploited and to be turned to a life of crime because of the inability to reason and reason things out. And so all of this requires us to have an aggressive involvement now in the educational system. We know that children are put out of school because they can't stay within the school confines. And they're sent to urban renewal centers. We know we have to have some formula to deal with them. That's what we're addressing now, to deal with these children that just sit there. We know children come in to start the school and do not finish it. Rather than just ignore them and let them go out there and become a part of what's happening out there, we know we have to fix that. So the point I'm making is that moving forward, we know the problem. We see the problem. We see it manifested in the statistics on crime. We see the fear of our population. But Mr. Jones, as I thought about this, and we don't do enough to bring home to Bahamian citizens the need to love the country, to know that when crime advisories are put on the country, that it is a negative impact on the country, it diminishes the economy and opportunities for Bahamians, and that we cannot afford to have, and I'm talking now to parents, right? I'm talking to adults who know people are being protected who are involved in crime. I'm talking about not allowing this to happen, because if they're your children, they are either victims who commit the crime, or victims who receive the brunt of the crime by being killed. But you know that is happening there, and we have to appeal to the public that this, we must as a people do better and do more. I get tired. We meet these people who come into our country and who speak, investors and others who have residents, and they talk about how they love this country. It's so beautiful, it's so meaningful. And I'm saying, what is the formula to get the Bahamian to know and believe the same thing? That they have a special country, and they have to protect it, and they have to be involved in protecting it. So that, I think the answer in that, we're going to put together the policies, the programs, the initiatives, the police bodies, numbers of police officers, equipment, technology, all of those things we're going to do. But at the same time, we are now designing a program, hopefully early in the new year, where we are able to be getting groups of young men and women, for that matter, who are challenged and vulnerable, and being able to place them, hopefully, within a program that is a major training program that will enable them to become better citizens in this country.
You've gotten some good marks for your urban renewal program, Prime Minister, but is it sufficiently resourced? Do they have the resources to really do what your urban renewal vision and idea would want them to do? And while you answer that, I'm happy that you mentioned just now that some of these criminals are actually victims of failed policies.
Yes. Urban renewal was intended by me to inform public policy, to let us know what's happening in the homes in our communities. Because it's easy for someone to be elected and be in government or be a public officer and not know and be indifferent to what's happening there. And the only way you are able to deal and come up with the answers is to know what's happening. So we ordered a house-by-house survey of 3 constituencies with a view to trying to learn from that, where we could inform public policy. But the point is that I know, for example, that we have to be much more effective with urban renewal than we have been, because it can do so much more. When we appointed the leadership, Algernon Allen and Mother Pratt, we put in 2 people who could lead that and who were in public life and who are, so to speak, grounded in the community.
Yeah, but do they have the tools? Do they have the resources that they need?
No, they don't have all of the resources they need, and they agitate for it. And it's always work in progress. And so from my point of view, we have to make a decision in this coming year, for example, where we employ them more effectively. And a part of I thought, which was an innovation, when they actually had you out there in the community with them, broadcasting what was happening. You see, because the difficulty is, people have to have confidence that the government is trying, that the public sector and private sector are trying to make a difference. So they could become stakeholders. And so if you are out there broadcasting, and this is what I told Mr. Allen recently, we have to go back to that, because part and parcel of the effectiveness of urban renewal is getting people to know it exists, getting people to know how deep it is, how it reach into the community, and people will suddenly becoming part of this public education program that is so necessary. So resources, resources, resources. Yes, we need resources for roads. We need resources for education, resources for health care. People are saying we shouldn't introduce national health insurance, for example, because it's too costly with that. Well, you listen, those people don't understand if you're poor and you're black, you die if you're sick with something. And so I'm driven by the reality, okay, that there are some fundamental things we have to do in this country, and we are going to do them in this term, and the country is going to be better off, and the country will make commitments that we'll have to honor through improving the economy, improving efficiencies, developing more sources of revenue for the country, and all of those things we are looking at now with a view of trying to bring into being.
Do you have a time frame for national health insurance?
Yes.
And what do you say
January
about
2016.
2016. What about the capacity of the economy to sustain it?
We believe that there will be the capacity. We know what we spend now in terms of contributions, over $100 million, the government's contribution into unions and their health care provisions and whatnot. We have a program that's in 3 phases: the vital phase, the core phase, and the expanded phase. The vital stage, the first phase, is about $360 million. Ultimately, in terms of the draw out of it, is about $633 million for all of it. We believe that we're in the first phase that we're going to put out. The question really for us is whether we have a single payer or multi-payer system. The insurance companies want multi-payer. it might be easier for the country if we have a single-payer system, but the point is we are wrestling with all of the issues involved in it. We're going to make it happen, just like we're going to have the University of the Bahamas in 2016. We're going to, in 2015, I beg your pardon, we're going to have in January 2016 National Health Insurance first phase, which will be a major breakthrough for the country. At the same time, we have to improve the physical premises for the hospital to be able to let people know that they are now insured in a national health insurance scheme.
I have 3 or 4 more questions for you. And Prime Minister, I want to talk a little bit about the performance of the public service. Whether the public service is up to scratch to deal with all of these issues that you are talking about. You have an ambitious program for the next 2-3 years. Do you have a public service that is well-resourced? Do you have a public service that has bought in to what the government is about?
Well, let me start with that question, whether the public service is bought in. I'm hoping that the public service will come to understand, at least those who think, that the way in which my government, or the direction that we're carrying the country, is the right direction, and that the outcomes that we expect are the right outcomes for the country. As to whether or not there is the capacity, it's always work in progress. Just yesterday, in a national health insurance presentation, I advocated to the group, the task force, presenting to me, that behind each of them ought to be a young, qualified Bahamian who will be sitting at their feet, so to speak. And when the department starts, or the national insurance carries it now, national health insurance is introduced, we have these people who would have been benefited as young trainees in the system, because governments must constantly work towards integrating into the public service the right qualified people, and giving them an opportunity to be exposed and not jealously guard this power and arrogate it unto ourselves. So that openness is necessary. With respect to training, I remember in the old days, the government used to send people up to Manchester University, Birmingham University, where I was at, training, a lot of people going for public administration. We started our own training here, but quite clearly, we need to have almost a department of the College of the Bahamas now focus on that, and we're having talks with the Minister for Public Service. The Public Service Commission has asked the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation to send in people to do a review of the public service, to make these assessments that led to your question, and so that we can actually put the country on the right path. The fact that we are engaged in a commitment from the national plan and involving the University of the Bahamas, or the College of the Bahamas now as it is called, is to ensure that the country is headed in a direction where questions that you ask on talk shows, questions that you ask here, that represent challenges to our country's development, are all part of the academic environment. And we have professors who are going to be looking at, from a pragmatic point of view, the issues and challenges of a country, keeping governments accountable for what they have to do, keeping society sensitized to what they have to do, writing books on what they have to do. So these questions are now, we will have experts coming out of the University of the Bahamas, out of that. This is some of the, what makes me excited, that I'm taking the country in that direction, where defining moments will come about, where we reach this plateau of development, I'm really excited about that when we look back at this period, Mr. Jones, I feel very excited that right across the board, we are going to be able to show that we looked at the natural assets of a country, whether it's salt, whether it's aragonite, whether it's rock, and that we've transformed the way in which we get value for it, that we will look at our human resources and see the National Training Agency, and that we've actually created a training agency that is pointed at a needs assessment in the country and addressing the needs assessment in the country, that we have a health system that produces, an educational system that produces, and that we will be the best little country in the world because our economic policies are progressive and transformative.
No one doubts that you are about to transform, or about transforming the Bahamas, and that you have a tremendous vision for our country. The question is whether or not your colleagues in cabinet are as adept as you are in these issues and understand where you're going. And Prime Minister, the question is, you just lost a Minister of Financial Services. Are you
Minister of Financial Services.
Yes. Are you going to shuffle your cabinet? There are people who believe that you don't shuffle cabinets. You just leave people in place for 5 years.
No, but I come to learn in a government and a small society
Yes.
that it is that when you have a minister who educated himself, and there's such a great necessity for personal interventions by ministers that I say, listen, why should I, just to please the political establishment or those who are outside there, let me look at this fella to see if he's working effectively. Let him use this for these 3 or 4 years. Now, I have to make some adjustments in the absence of Ryan Pinder. I'm going to obviously have someone take that place because I'm committed to a Ministry of Financial Services. That's a year-ending decision.
This is the end of the year now, Prime Minister?
That's my point. I know it's the end of the year, so
Okay.
it's a year-ending decision
Okay.
in terms of his replacement and the movements that will take place. I'm going to appoint some Queen's counsels. I know that there's some lawyers who will be intrigued and by that, enthralled, some of them, as a result of it, because I hopefully going to do a good job in being able to put some non-traditional choices in there as Queen's counsel. And I'm going to do some interesting things as we move into the new year that I think will impact the country positively.
You believe 2015 then will be a fantastic year, eh?
I think it's going to be a great year, and I think it's going to lay the basis for a great period forward for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Well, Prime Minister, I'd like to thank you so very much for being here today. Of course, there are many other questions that we have, but your questions, your answers to our questions have been so informative. I decided just to allow you to have the opportunity to explain these various initiatives in a very...
Thank you very much, Mr.
way.
Jones. And as I was talking, I was looking back at the time when you walked into my office to form a company to start this enterprise.
Yes,
and so
you were the lawyer.
I was the lawyer, and I look back and I congratulate you for all that you have done. I encourage you to do more. The government needs to be supportive of you because it's a voice out there that we respect, that is independent, and I want to be able to say it. And I look forward to listening and watching your development, and I wish you the very best and prosperity in the new year.
Thank you so very much, Prime Minister, and I wish for you a very healthy, happy, and productive new year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening to our program today. Happy New Year again.